to that. Thank you, Shani, for the lunch, or whoever organised it. It was very good, wasn't it? That's a good way to put it. Thank you, Kylie. Appreciate that. Okay, we will keep pressing on. And we're up to 5.10, which is the health and safety report. Louise, welcome to the meeting. Great to see you again.
Thank you, Bruce. This report is a regular report that comes up to Risk and Assurance, and it's intended to provide you an update on events and incidents that have happened within our areas of responsibility, and also give you some insights into how we're progressing the development and enhancement of our health and safety management system. Just because this is a new committee, the report does talk a little bit around our health and safety and wellbeing strategy, which is available for you if you would like to read it. But the key elements of that strategy are around leadership, engagement, safe systems, and continuous improvement. We also have another number of improvement actions that we're working on that have arisen from an audit undertaken by KPMG in 2023. We're about halfway through implementing those audit recommendations to help give us assurance that we're on the right track with regards to continuing to prioritise the right things in a timely way. We engaged KPMG to do a bit of a check-in on us through a desktop-based exercise in late last year. We really wanted to understand, are we focusing on the right things and in the right time? Are we giving it enough emphasis? In short, the report identified that we have we're doing the right thing, and we're embedding work in a detailed manner. I won't go into the details of that right now because the report author will be joining us later under item 5.13 as part of the assurance report, and he will go into more detail from his perspective on where things are at, and we can pick up any questions then if that works for you. One of the key areas of focus for health and safety is around a thing called critical risks. And in the health and safety space, critical risks are defined as those that have the potential to cause permanent harm or injury and or death. So they're the big ticket infrequent things. And we have identified 11 critical risks that our staff and workers might be exposed to through the course of their work here at Council. Those are listed in Table 1. Addressing these risks and identifying what we call minimum mandatory controls, or the must-dos, is a key focus of our work program this year. The key priorities that we're tackling at the moment relate to aggressive and threatening behaviour, asbestos, driving, and working with animals. This focus on critical risks is strongly aligned with the Health and Safety Amendment Bill that specifically pulls out management of critical risks, so you'll see that that's wholly consistent with industry standard. One of the key areas of work that we've focused on over recent months is completion of a framework to help our staff understand how best to work with other PCBUs or persons conducting undertaking or business to make sure that we jointly understand the risks that are posed by any piece of work and understand and agree which of the organisations who are involved in that work are best placed to manage it. We've done that through development of 3 documents, one of which is the Contractor Health and Safety Management Framework, which provides a high-level overview of roles and responsibilities and the process that we expect staff to go through. There's another document that's called Working Alongside Taupō District Council. The purpose of that document is to share that with contractors in advance of engaging them, so they have an understanding around what we see as high risks and some of our expectations of them before they join our contracting team. The details, the day-to-day nitty-gritty, is captured in a supplier health and safety management guide that talks staff through all the things and questions they need to ask, right through from scoping, procurement, pre-start, induction, delivery and closeout. We're in the process of rolling out training for that. We've started with our Tier 3 managers and given them some oversight of that, and then we'll be doing more detailed training with contract managers throughout the business so that they're aware of all of those details. I just wanted to touch a little bit on some of the significant events that we've had over recent months. There's quite a large number of reported events, but I'd just like to draw to your attention that that partially reflects a long time between risk and assurance committee meetings. So we haven't met since I think September of last year. So that data's been pulled from August right through to now. You can see that we have had a number of aggressive and threatening behaviour events. There's some vehicle-related events, and there was one matter that involved WorkSafe. In terms of aggressive and threatening behaviour, we do continue to see instances where our staff are impacted by this, both physically and verbally. We haven't had any physical assaults, but having people in the presence of aggressive people is quite challenging, and that is why it's our number one risk to get on top of, and we're the most progressed in terms of developing our minimum mandatory controls for this risk. There was another incident where a member of the public was injured by sliding doors at our museum. Effectively, the sensor didn't detect that person and the doors shut on them. They took that directly to WorkSafe. We've done quite a detailed investigation as to what's happened, and we're working with the supplier to just double check that everything is working properly in terms of sensors and things. They're coming on site. They'll be here tomorrow and Thursday to do any repairs that might be needed, testing sensors, that sort of thing. Another area of work that's occurred in recent months is engaging with WorkSafe on what's called an asbestos liaison protocol. When you have asbestos discovered out in the community or in different locations, there's quite a number of organisations that may need to be involved depending on whether or not it's considered a workplace. And it can get a little confusing as to who should be the lead organisation. So to support clarification of that, WorkSafe some years ago now has developed what they call the Asbestos Liaison Protocol, and that just helps guide organisations such as ours, Fire and Emergency, WorkSafe, Te Whare Ora, etc. on who should be doing what in the case of different asbestos discovery scenarios. So we've been working to provide feedback on that and expect to be a signatory prior to it coming live on the 1st of April. And that is it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louise. That's really important. I'm glad you took a bit of extra time with us as a new committee, because it does reflect my ongoing drive that we understand systems and processes and controls over areas of key risk, and obviously health, safety and well-being. So look, I do appreciate that briefing. So folk, do we have questions at all for Louise? Nicole?
Thanks, Louise. That was really interesting, good report. The 26 aggressive and threatening behaviours, is there a theme around the departments within council that's happening? And if so, if you can elaborate a little bit. And just to my second question, because it's short, vehicles that we're driving in, have they got any sort of monitoring or video on them, just as a newbie question?
Yeah, sure. If I may, I'll answer the second question first. Our vehicles do have GPS monitoring, and they do have monitoring for sharp braking and aggressive acceleration and that sort of thing. And that is monitored regularly by our fleet manager and reported up to managers, etc. With regards to the aggressive and threatening behaviour incidences, we do tend to find more prevalence at the Superloos. It tends to be a key location where we have challenges there. Often too down at the Tongariro Street Information Centre, where we have a number of public inquiries, some of which relate to bus ticketing and frustrations associated with tickets not being issued or not being able to buy because of the relationship. It might need to be funded by another organisation, that sort of thing. So I think that's it. Is there anything I've missed, Nikki?
Just over that,
Come on up.
over that time, during August is normally the time that our compliance team completes dog seizures, so that over that space you see a little bit of an increase in angst as well. So that is with them visiting on site, but also calls to the call centre and in-person visits at the customer service centre as well. and the pools. We've had the Mangakino pools open over that space over Christmas, and if you've got school holidays and whatnot, there is an increase, I guess, of youth and what have you, where those incidents can be involving them, so that increases that a bit too.
Kylie and then Wahine.
Just looking at that framework with the numbers 1, 3, 5, 6 and potentially number 9, has the One Health framework ever been explored within our district as a way to help manage that health and safety from a multi-sector approach? You know, things like antisocial behaviour. It's not just something we can manage as an organisation, just it's sort of something moving out of the UN and across the globe as a concept, and I just wondered if that's something that's reached the Taupō district.
Not specifically that framework, but we do, as part of all of our investigations into what we should be putting in place for managing critical risks, we do quite a, for want of a better word, a literature review of industry best practice. So we go and have a look at what's out there and make sure that anything that we're putting in place is aligned with that, and that we're not missing what would be considered appropriate controls, so that if something did untoward happen, WorkSafe comes in and says, well, the industry typically does this, why have you not done that as well? And so we do, there's quite a number of places that we do that benchmarking from, so that kind of alignment and calibration does occur, but I can't personally say that I've referenced the framework that you're referring to.
Might be an exciting read at one point.
Maybe you could flick it on if you know the source of it, Kylie. That'd be great.
Can I go again, Wahine? Yep. I've just seen the EMA through another entity have introduced a new health and safety process framework that supports smaller entities than ours, but again, that was just another one that, when you see these wonderful resources, I was quite blown away reading the documents of that, so that would be another one that I think just would add sugar and spice and all things nice for keeping our people safe.
Thanks, Kylie. Wahine, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. I think I just wanted to know about the aggressive and threatening behaviour and the need for strengthened system controls. I think two parts of the question: what types of strengthened system controls are you guys looking at or exploring? And secondly, I was quite surprised just to see that this many incidents are happening to our council staff, and whether we might consider actually bringing some light to these incidents and creating awareness out in the public, both utilising our social media platforms and websites to actually step back and tell our community, well, hey, look at the amount of aggressive behaviour that's coming at our staff. This is not okay, because if you're a member of the public, you don't know that all of these things are happening. So especially down at the Superloo, and then obviously we're going to be having council deliberations around the future of the Superloo. So maybe if we were, plugging some information around the amount of health and safety incidents, particularly the aggressive and threatening behaviour, it might be helpful in when council goes to make deliberations and those types of decisions.
Thank you. So in terms of the types of things we're looking to improve our systems and controls, your point around sharing with the community ties in really nicely with one of the key things we're proposing to do, which is to develop a zero tolerance policy. And that would be obviously shared within our staff to let them know what sort of behaviours they can tolerate, or more specifically not tolerate, but also more widely with the community to say this is where we're drawing the line. So I think when we get to a point where we're ready to publish that and adopt it, that would be a really good opportunity to have some comms go out around why we've brought this in, which touches on your point around the fact that our staff are exposed to a number of really unpleasant situations on quite a regular basis. The other controls we're looking at is, within that policy there'll be things like making really clear processes around how we might trespass people who've demonstrated unreasonable behaviour. There's also quite a bit of thinking that's gone on around some of the physical security. There is a central government organisation that talks around sort of security requirements and what physical things you should put in place at different locations depending on how accessible they are to the public. So Nikki's done quite a bit of work to go through all of our locations and understand what should be in place there. And then we're also looking at systems and processes for our staff who are, out and about amongst the community through community engagement or even through council meetings sometimes where things might escalate, to give them a little bit of support in what they should do there. And all of that will be supported by training. We already do what's called de-escalation training, and that's to date been focused on those staff that are exposed to physical aggression, but we're also looking to roll out training for those that repeatedly get negative feedback via the phones and that sort of thing as well, because that can wear you down after a bit of time and affect your well-being. So yeah.
And I think just on that as well, another good thing to have staff training around is actually recognising behavioural signs that, it's not always a matter of can we de-escalate the situation, but whether or not this person standing in front of me is in their right frame of mind to be standing in front of me, especially around the superloo and I'm talking about drugs, eh? So that could be something good for our staff to be made aware of as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's great. Any other comments? Yes, Sandra.
Thanks, Bruce. I sort of had in the back of my mind that online wasn't really mentioned, but perhaps take it to a different level. I'm thinking about the telephone, which is not mentioned in here. Presumably, I would have thought that would have been the real front line of aggressive behaviour, wouldn't it? People upset about things.
Through the chair, yes, they do receive a number of negative conversations and interactions, and that's why we're thinking it's a good opportunity for us to support them with how they can de-escalate or manage some of those negative conversations, and also give them an understanding around when it's okay to say, I'm going to terminate the call because this has gone beyond what's considered reasonable customer behaviour.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is. It's represented under.
Can we use the microphones, please?
I think it's represented in the figures, like those 26 aggressive ones included, telephone ones, and also aggressive and threatening behaviour, number 1 on table 1, also included. It's within that. It's not mentioned in words, but it is, my understanding, included in the table.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That's been a very good discussion, very helpful, Louise, as always. Again, deeply appreciative that we've had a focus here, particularly around systems and processes, but it's also good to discuss the events as well, so that's great. Can I move to the recommendation, please, which is that we receive the report, and always seems a bit short, but it is, we will receive. I have a move and a seconder for that, please. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Kylie. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Louise, and probably Mark, if you're going to help us as well, the insurance, please.
I'll make a start if that's okay. Again, just recognising that this is the first Risk and Assurance Committee for many people, we thought we'd take the opportunity just to give you a little bit of background around how our insurance program is managed and the extent of it. So you can see through the introductory discussion that we have a number of policies that cover physical damage to our assets, liability policies such as professional indemnity, public liability, etc., and other potential sources of loss like crime and cyber. all of these policies are procured jointly through the Bay of Plenty Shared Services Group, so that we can effectively get better buying power and access international markets through our insurance broker, Aon. We did provide you a bit of a breakdown of what those policies cover and the costs associated with them, and you can see that insurance is a fairly significant area of expenditure for council, with over $2 million per annum being spent on premiums. In terms of the insurance market, we have up until recently had, for nearly 7 years in a row, really significant, quite steep increases in policy premiums. That did soften quite a lot at the end of 2024. That has meant that we've been in the fortunate position to have a significant reduction in our property insurance, particularly material damage and business interruption, and that resulted in an 18% decrease on last year's premiums. So, it's a significant $260,000 savings. Although we do have a softer market at the moment, the market, of course, is always responding to what's happening with regards to insurance payouts internationally, and there is no guarantee that that will continue. It will be interesting to see what international events impact might be in terms of the insurance market going forwards. One of the things that we're observing and being advised by Aon, our broker, is that, and you will have seen this in the news yourself, that insurers are becoming more savvy in terms of how they take on clients effectively. They're being a bit more selective, they're being picky around high risk areas, and I think we can continue to see that happening in the market with climate change, sea level rise, and some sort of managed retreat happening there. So I think we're quite fortunate in that we aren't adjacent to a coastline, but that's not to say that we might not have increased scrutiny in that space through other risk types like landslides, etc. So that will be a focus for the development of our insurance program going forwards, is to understand where those key areas of vulnerability are, so that we're in best place to try and ensure we get insurance for them. Attached to the report is the Aon Insurance Market Insights report. That's available publicly if you're ever interested in having a research for yourself going forwards, and that just talks a little bit more, in a bit more detail, around the fact that insurers are looking for data and analysis to differentiate who they're going to choose to insure going forwards. The paper also gives a little bit of background with regards to infrastructure insurance. So just to highlight, the two key policies that we have for our assets, if you like, one is material damage and business interruption, and that covers effectively all our above ground assets. And because those are above ground, they're subject to a number of risks, so from fire through to a truck running into something, etc. So they're insured for what's called all perils, or all types of risk. Then we have what's called infrastructure insurance, which is effectively below ground reticulated assets, so think pipes, anything below the ground. And that policy is structured in a way that it only responds to natural catastrophe events, because that's the type of risk that those types of infrastructure are going to be most likely exposed to. So just a point of difference there. We, up until recently, hadn't had infrastructure insurance in place because we were effectively self-insuring through the TEL fund. But what we had observed over a period of years is that there was effectively a widening gap of between the value of the insured assets and the value of the TEL fund. So we had an increasing uninsured liability, if you like. So in order to respond to that, Sarah and I did some work, and Council decided to adopt infrastructure insurance for those assets in December 2024. Whenever we come into our insurance renewals, what happens on the 1st of November each year, we are always trying to strike the right balance between the costs of insurance and our risk exposure. And figure 1 just talks a little bit about some of the things that feed into that balancing act, just as a way of background. And we will continue to pursue our understanding of all of the things on either side of that ledger as we progress our insurance renewals. To help support our understanding of potential loss, TDC, along with other BOPLAS councils, procured some probabilistic loss modelling from Aon. So that was in particular focused on earthquake impacts and also narrowly focused on 3 water assets. That was the scope that the broader group agreed upon. And what you can see there from table 1 is that of our 825 million worth of assets, 3 waters assets that were modelled, we lost about 11, or could potentially lose up to about 11% with a 1 in 1,000 year likelihood. So that means that we can be 99.9% confident that in any given year we won't incur losses of more than 90 million based on that loss modelling analysis result. However, like any model, there are limitations, and one of the key limitations of this model relates to lateral spreading risk, so where earthquakes cause ground to move sideways, basically. And when Aon did the modelling, although they couldn't give us specific figures around the impacts of how lateral spreading risk impacts our assets, they were able to identify that we have up to $10 million worth of assets that could be impacted through that risk, plus the potential remains for our wastewater treatment plant to be impacted by that, because its location is on the side of the hill next to the river, and if you get lateral movement, it's not uncommon for you to see sort of landslides and damage occurring in that space. Our 3 Waters team are highly aware of this risk, and they are working with specialist geotech engineers and others to understand what the potential exposure is to our wastewater treatment plant, with the intention of putting in some resilience and strengthening work there in the long term. And I think that's probably enough from me at the moment. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Louise. Again, very helpful. And again, I'm grateful that you're giving us a broader sort of strategy and risk assumption. We made quite a significant decision back to decouple self-insurance and go to insurance. It's quite a risk transfer decision, obviously with the cost, but I get that. Folk, do you have questions for Louise, or indeed Mark, who's here as well? Yes, John.
So with your infrastructure cover, are you insuring for depreciated value or replacement value?
I'm actually, very difficult question for me to answer. Sarah, did you want to comment on that one?
Through the chair, generally we insure for depreciated replacement value. So like any insurance, you insure for what the asset's worth rather than what it will cost to replace. Essentially, if the funding mechanisms have worked, you obviously should have enough within your reserves or within your debt headroom to cover the gap, but that's a conversation Aon wishes to have with us later on the month, Louise. They're coming over to begin that discussion with exec and the management team, but then we'll further come to this table. I know Bruce is keen to have a workshop later in the year as well in relation to insurance, because it's becoming such a big item and such a big risk area from a financial strategy perspective. Hence why, if you remember at the annual plan LTP workshop last week, that I talked about the inclusion of insurance in the financial strategy as its own separate part.
Actually, through the chair, that was a question I put to Mark and Louise before the meeting around our exposure relative to our reserves, particularly as we fund depreciation. I guess if we're going to have a workshop at some stage around the insurance, when I look through table B1, there's a number of items there that, in my view, need a little closer scrutiny, particularly around the changing environment that we have. So I look forward to that. And thank you for your answer earlier on.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, Sandra?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Insurance is always a fascinating. It is genuinely fascinating, yeah. Have we had any significant claims in the last couple of years? And if we have, has that affected any of our premiums?
I wouldn't say we've had any significant claims in the last couple of years. Depends on your definition of significant. We've constantly processing small claims, but in my tenure here of 15, 16 months, certainly not any significant claims that I'm aware of. I don't know whether anything that you can think of.
Yeah, nothing I wouldn't describe as significant. We did have some a contractor run into an irrigator, for disposing treated water onto land, that sort of thing. So there's been various claims come through like that. But yeah, my understanding is that our claims profile isn't adversely affecting our ability to obtain insurance, and certainly not on an affordable rate. And you must remember that all of our policies are procured through that group, so they'd have to be pretty massive for it to kind of come above the radar on from the insurer's perspective.
Yeah, I think through the chair, probably Nigel was going to jump in, but there are certainly a number of items that are outstanding in relation to litigation, which you'll get an update in the confidential section.
Thanks, Sarah. Through the chair, I was just going to say, probably not since we disposed of the last leaky home claim a number of years ago. This will be the last significant insurance claim we've had.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons it would be useful, and thank you, Sarah, for raising it, that I would be keen that we have a sort of more strategic understanding. This is a good strategic start, but a workshop prior to renewal so that we can understand all this good work that's going on. Which makes me think, just one thing that you might just want to comment on, Louise and Mark, is just take us through the next steps. So
sorry,
I was very interested. Oh, sorry.
May I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, no, sorry. Yeah, I was just getting my question in, so you go for it. No,
okay.
You go for it, Rachel.
Well, it's along similar lines with building in mind, just given that you indicated, well, it was indicated to the Risk and Assurance Committee that insurance for anything related to the Building Act was getting quite difficult to secure. Have the government changes or indicated changes made any difference to that, do you think, now that they're looking at joint and several liability rather than just council?
Honestly, I'm unable to answer that question. I'm not sure if Sarah has any insight in that space. Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously the changes actually haven't been through legislation, while certainly a proposal of the building structural changes, they haven't been enacted yet. So until then, I suspect it will make a difference because our risk will go down slightly, but to be confirmed.
I was interested just in the next steps, Louise and Mark. What are you, if you just expand on what you're planning to do? The the scenario modelling, great, get it, and absolutely needed. But I was just wondering, what are our next steps that you're planning in this area?
So we're currently working with Aon to try and develop a broader understanding of how earthquake might impact upon our other asset classes. So although we won't necessarily engage them to do detailed modelling, they have indicated they'd be prepared to give us, and have done, high-level estimates based on their level of experience around how an earthquake of that magnitude might impact on types of assets, so 20% loss, 30% loss, that sort of thing. So we're working to develop a model that will enable us to understand our exposure in its entirety for that event and potential post-loss funding requirements. So think deductibles, think potential escalation as a result of a major event in terms of cost pricing, you know, everyone wants the same contractor, and then bring that to you against another profile that says, actually, here are all our funding sources, from insurance through to central government, etc., through to, you know, debt headroom, so that you as a community can understand our potential uninsured loss exposure, if any, and then we can make some more strategic decisions around whether or not we think that exposure fits within our risk appetite. So to help inform our understanding of that, we're working quite closely with Aon, because we want to make sure that that model accurately reflects how the policies actually respond on the ground. And it's a little bit complicated, particularly in the infrastructure insurance space, because it only covers off 40%, because the central government funding covers the remaining 60%. So we're just taking our time to work through that. Like Sarah mentioned earlier, they're joining us on the 20th of March, and we will be talking with them a little bit more around other opportunities that exist from different, you know, parametric types of insurance, etc., to understand what we could or should be doing. We're also wanting to learn more in terms of lessons from what's happened with other councils post-disasters. So, for example, one of the examples that Aon have given me over the phone is you might have a bridge insured, for example. However, the formed land and the bridge abutments or any culverts relating to that, a lot of councils don't insure, but that is actually quite a significant potential source of cost in terms of recovery. So there's some of those nuances that we might look at getting more detailed valuations done, for example, but that's kind of where we're at more broadly.
Look, that's great, because I think that's actually great to hear. And I appreciate we can only take steps at a time, but that gives a much more rounded picture. And when you start to think about what you've got covered, it's sort of building on your question, John, what have you got covered for what? What are the funding sources? You then start to have the trade-offs around risk transfer, what we will carry, etc. So I don't know how quickly that will. I imagine there's a bit of work in that, and it might be that a strategic workshop has to go with part information. But the more we can have of that, the better.
Yeah, through the chair, I was going to say, I suspect timing-wise, insurance has been well and truly looked at the moment in relation to rates caps, because of course increasing our level of service from an insurable asset perspective is extremely challenging under a rates cap environment, because something else would have to be substituted for that, which is a hard thing to sell a community. But yeah, so that is, I suspect, the reason why Aon is quickly rushing to come and see us, and then why it would be appropriate to have a workshop at this.
Brilliant.
Yep.
No, that'll be great. No, that's wonderful news, and thank you for the structured way in which we're approaching this, recognising we've got to continually review and make some decisions further down the track.
If I may, just from the chip seats at the back here, just to add.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. Where's that noise coming from?
Just to add, given exactly that, Sarah, there's quite a topic through the CEs obviously at the moment too. So I can assure you that when we meet, particularly in the Bay of Plenty, insurance takes up a large portion of our agenda.
Absolutely.
Just having read through this again, I just want to acknowledge Mark, Louise, thank you for this. Well written. It's a comprehensive report. Appreciate being able to partially digest it.
Yep, it reflects some of the challenges we've got here, so thank you for that. The motion is that we receive the report. I'm going to move that, Dicing. Thank you, Wahine. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, it's carried. Thank you for that. Risk management update. Don't go away, guys. This is a great report. We could spend hours on this one. I know we don't have that time, but it's a great report. Thank you.
The previous elected members identified a couple of years back 10 strategic risks which they thought were affecting the council. We've run workshops with the key sponsors for these risks, and also for the subject matter experts within the teams, and have built 9 of the 10 strategic risks into risk profiles. The underperforming council risk profile, we pushed back to the post-election to workshop this one for the new elected members. The rest are in place and form part of a rolling programme which I review or drive a review with the sponsors every 3 months to make sure that those profiles are kept up to date and the risks are regularly reviewed and they're current. We did the risk review last year, and since that review and framework was agreed in September, we've run the 9 strategic risks through that machine and have re-rated them against the new criteria, which is reflected in the table 1, which has driven down most of those risks. The only one that's sitting still above the risk appetite is the zero harm strategic risk. There's a bit of narrative about why that is sitting above risk appetite, and I know Louise has just spoken through the health and safety update with a view to hopefully driving down this risk with the action plan that's in place to hopefully reduce the zero harm risks across the organisation. Enterprise risk management is the next big piece on our agenda. We are developing a programme now to pilot enterprise risk management rollout through the organisation. We have the first workshop scheduled for Sarah's team in a few weeks' time. We've taken a lot of the work that KPMG did for us and have fed that into the enterprise risk management work that we're doing. And the last piece of the risk report is the horizon scanning. So we had a look at potential emerging risks that are facing local government across New Zealand, and the two that we thought it was worth raising. A lot of the risks that we identified are already captured in our strategic risk profiles, which is great because we've identified them and we've got pieces of work in place to mitigate those risks and to keep tabs on those risks. The two that are not is the procurement and delivery market conditions risk, and also the security threat environment risk, which is particularly over the last couple of weeks probably increasing globally. So we thought it would be worth raising those. And I think that's all I had to say. If Louise wants to add anything, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So we've got some great information here in terms of, firstly, the re-rating. Appreciate that we went through that process partway through last year because we had some, actually, from a risk appetite perspective, and you remember some perverse results, really, wasn't it, Sarah? I think was really the case. So it gives us a much better sense of what our risk environment is. Appreciate the emerging risk, and you've got some great information here behind in terms of the actual details of the risk, which I've already referred to this morning. So look, it's a relatively unformed discussion, but I think equally now's a chance. Sorry, when I say it's unformed, I'm not giving a lot of direction. I'd just be keen to know any comments or questions you'd like to raise. Kim?
Excuse me. Yeah, just in terms of our 10 strategic risks, and then we've got 2 emerging risks. Not sure whether it's a question for Mark or whether it's a question for you as chair or for us in general. Given the environment we operate in is reasonably dynamic, at what stage and what process have we got for merging emerging risks into our top 10, or do we rationalise this? And I'm really just thinking out loud here. So if we've identified this as emerging, I guess the next question is, well, what are we going to do about it?
Sarah, you have first crack.
So I think those emerging risks are trends, and they kind of hit across the board. So a good example is the one Mark talked about in relation to those security concerns. So one of those factors would be to do with the critical infrastructure, and then another factor would be to do with ICT infrastructure. So those risks actually are the emerging risks should be factored into our strategic risks. I don't think they're new strategic risks, but things that are emerging that need to be identified within our strategic risks if the trend continues. That's my...
Yeah, and I think probably I would be keen, Mark, to see with our next report how that's been done. I mean, it's, you know, when I looked at the procurement and delivery market conditions, which the risk is almost an issue now, I would have thought, with what's happening in the other parts of the world. Non-delivery of projects or those sorts of risks, this clearly would, in my view, probably need to be integrated in. So to really, I guess we're saying to have a third column, which is really your point, Kevin, which is so what? I mean, with an emerging risk, it can also be that, in fact, it's a case that we're just keeping our eye on that for a couple of meetings to see whether it emerges in a way that is actually going to affect us. So, I mean, I'd encourage us, Kevin, to think wide, and, you know, not everything that we identify might actually be totally relevant, and if that's the case, we can dismiss it. But there's almost a sense we just to keep a wee log of it. Is it still on our emerging risk? Have we integrated it? Is it something we're still watching, or have we decided it's passed us by and we don't need to worry about it? I think that would be valuable from that perspective. Having said that, Kevin, I think it does also mean creating more work for all of us. I think with your annual plan getting close to finalise, getting somewhere near, presumably the visioning work around your LTP, it really is a time ripe for us as a council to sit down and say, are these still our risks? Starting with actually, what do we want to achieve? What's our strategic objectives? What are the uncertainties? Going back to my previous comments. So whether that's timely with an insurance workshop or something, perhaps we can talk about that a wee bit later on. Be my view. Okay, any other questions or comments?
Can I tap on a little bit
Go for it.
supplementary to that, please? I just think we have another bit of a global issue out there of things moving around biosecurity incursions. So we've got the clam issue here in Taupō sitting on our doorstep. Hopefully it doesn't come our way. I know it's not directly our responsibility, but I just think that biosecurity is something we should consider. Recently talking to a friend heavily involved in forestry biosecurity, it's very, very close to a Douglas fir disease landing in New Zealand, which would take out most of the forestry in our region. It is on our doorstep, basically, knocking pretty closely. And what does that look like for the Taupō district? Should something happen to all of that forestry? We actually haven't got any defence as a nation to it. And also, just from an animal perspective, I know it seems a little bit out the gate, but you know, things like foot and mouth, if we all of a sudden had to destroy all of the animals in this district that come under that category, how would we actually deal with that? And look, I know they're not necessarily directly our problem, but it is a waste product, and I would suggest that we would have some responsibility. And I don't know how many thousands of animals we're talking about, but again, we watch what happens at the borders, and it's only, well, the words that I hear, it's not if, it's a when moment.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I'm sorry, you're getting very close to one of my responsibilities as chair of the MPI Risk Committee here, because foot and mouth disease and incursions is, I mean, I don't think I'm giving anything away, high risk, high threat.
No. You know what I'm saying.
But I would encourage somewhere down the track, it may well be that there should be a discussion between MPI and Taupō. I imagine there possibly is, around preparedness and readiness for those risks, which, as you say, bird flu or avian flu is when, not if. So that may be a useful thing to take on board. Perhaps we should note that as potentially emerging. Thanks for that. Any other? Do you guys have any comments on that, by the way?
Sounds sensible. I know that the avian bird flu is, again, not a if, it's a when.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, thanks. I'm quite keen just to understand at a very high level how how we kind of give these identifiers in terms of the level of risk that we're looking at, and also whether it might be necessary actually for this council to consider having another risk appetite workshop, given that we have 5 new councillors around the table and a new mayor. I know that council did significant work just in, was it June 2025, to create the risk appetite and risk profile of council, but I just think given that we've got so much new blood around the table, I would actually appreciate delving into this a little bit more.
Great. No, thank you for that, Rohini. Look, it should be under constant review in that sense. So we made grounds, dare I say, hopefully for the idea of a workshop, but that would be logical that we'd look at appetite as well. Not just what is our risk framework, but what is our appetite, and goes with it too. Just to touch in with it. Can I just check, Louise and Mark? I was interested in actually all the analyses, and I love the commentary and emerging issues section on each of the big risks. Well done. That's a lot of hard work, and it's a very valuable read. Just remind me, the risk ratings, have we updated those? Because with financial strategy, so I'm on my page 182, but I think I might be different to what you are electronically. If I read this correctly, it says that we're not within TDC's risk appetite.
Through the chair, I think, as you can see, it's medium. I think the letter on the financial strategy page just didn't get updated. Mark was trying to do them under pressure. So the yes, no hadn't been, but it was on the main page. So on Mark's cover report, it did say, so the only one that remains outside of the appetite is the health and safety.
Brilliant. That's what I figured, but I just needed to check because actually I was confused just for a moment as to where I was standing. I love this, and I actually think our financial strategy, and I mean this is subsequent, obviously, to the writing of this, must be coming under more stress, and I think we're going to have to watch this one carefully. Again, I'm waxing eloquent with Kevin here on Iran and the issues of costs and cost inflation, supply coming into us. This is a significant challenge, which nobody would have known when you wrote the report, but actually exists here, which would be reasonably important. And I just wanted for efficiency, because we did have, and probably from me, can I say this, a Treasury update report. Not Treasury Update Report, sorry, the Financial Strategy Update Report. I actually think we could, for efficiency reasons, push this in here as well, rather than having to have a separate paper, just a small point here. If I go back to that table, I just think in terms of the existing risks as we have them, the existing appetites as we have them, going back to my little introduction at the start, we do have the zero harm outside of appetite. We've had Louise's paper on health and safety and the big actions you're taking, which is there. I think we've got to ask the question, so are we happy that that's sufficient to address the risk? I'm asking that in a principled way, not as a criticism or a critique, or even suggesting anything other than, are we happy? Nikki? Oh, sorry, Kylie? Who's Nikki? Nikki is, sorry.
There was kind of a question I had, and I wondered if that came up in the confidential, just what's on the
Okay, rightio, that's fine. I was prepared to say broadly that I'm happy with what I've read, that it's okay, but I just, let's come back to that one then when we see what comes out of PX, but we need to be comfortable as governors, at a risk governance sense, that when we've got a red no, we're happy with the action that's being taken, or the planned actions that's being taken.
I was in correlation with reading.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Okay.
Through the chair, sorry, can I just circle back to the first question that I asked about the risk levels and actually how we come to identify the level of risk in terms of that actual strategic risk? I'm just keen to understand some background around it, because I would argue a couple of those risks are actually not low, but are a bit higher than what they're indicated there on the table.
So for each profile, we identify the plausible risks that are affecting or driving that. And then we have a heat map that we plot the likelihood and the consequence of each of those risks against a heat map. And that heat map, which was endorsed by the committee in September, then gives us that rating of whether it's very low up to very high. So there's a number of factors that are balanced in that. So when we look at the health and safety or the zero harm risk, we look at a whole load of factors there. So the reputational risk, we look at the financial risk, and we look at the risk of harm to individuals. So there's a number of factors that are encapsulated. We rate the higher of them.
I might just add to that, if I may. So in terms of stepping right back, when we met in June 2025, we look at all the potential types of risk impacts, whether it's financial, health and safety, late delivery, that sort of thing. And we worked with the Risk and Assurance Committee at the time, facilitated by Bruce, to understand where our risk appetite sat against that full spectrum for any of those. So you might say, I'm uncomfortable with $50,000 worth of financial loss, or I'm uncomfortable with $5 million, and figure out where everyone sat on that continuum for all of those different types of risk. And then off the back of that, we went away and developed what's called a consequence table, which is where you go, a low risk for those different areas of risk equals this, and a high risk equals that. And so that's all strongly aligned with our risk appetite. And then similarly for likelihood, so risk is likelihood times consequence when you analyse it. So that's the kind of context for the measurement tools, if you like, that we apply when we come and produce the risk assessment ratings. And then against that framework, we do exactly what Mark's described, is look at some of the plausible scenarios and understand where they fit in terms of consequence against those tables. Does that help? Yeah.
Through the chair.
Yes, Sandra.
Thank you. Going back to your comments about the financial strategy, Bruce, it's been commented on throughout the afternoon that the current situation in the world is going to impact us. Also going back to your comments about, rather than us sitting here just identifying things, we talk about solutions. We're going into the long-term plan now, and we're going to need to take this particular risk into account, and the long-term plan that we were looking at is probably going to be different, literally in the last 5 days, and that is going to have to be one of our solutions. We cannot ignore what we've got here and what all council is going to go into in the next few weeks, really.
Yeah, look, I think it's a future risk. I mean, I again was talking actually very quickly with Sarah, actually it was lunchtime. Our balance sheet looks pretty good. From a financial strength perspective, we are in I think comfortable is the wrong word. We're in a sound position, aren't we, Sarah? Which is a great position to be in. I think the point that I'm making here is the headwinds in front of any council, but including us here in Taupō, is pretty dark. Or mixing clouds and wind, aren't I? The wind is pretty strong, and there is that will be challenged. So I agree with you entirely. I think the status, the residual risk, which is what Wahine was getting at before about one or two of these things, I don't have any trouble with the current assessment of medium, but it could climb in the case. It probably is climbing now as we speak. So that'll be the interesting thing next time round, is where we get to.
Yeah. I was going to say, through the chair, you're talking about this in relation to, availability of supply, costs of supply, and particularly in that infrastructure construction space. This isn't anything outside of what we've been through in the last few years, and if you look at our depreciation increase, that's been the context, right? I mean, we can only assume at this stage it's short term, and that is what we've been told. I'm touching a lot of wood, but
that's right.
But it isn't anything that isn't already built into our financial strategy from a normal risks that we manage, because we know global markets are fickle. We know New Zealand, there's some particular challenges around our infrastructure and the volume of work that needs to be done with the amount of resources we've got in New Zealand to do it. And again, all those risks have been pointed out in relation to rates capping, because incredibly hard to manage that under a rates cap environment. And I think that's the key risk for the next financial strategy, actually, because at the moment we've got the ability to raise revenue, and we won't have that going forward.
Yes, that's actually a very, very good point. We may self-impose what we think is a reasonable rate, but soon I suspect we won't have any choice, which makes it a big issue. So, Sandra, totally agree with your point. It is reasonably important. I just have one other question, if I could, and it's partly because I've spent a bit of time in Wellington, I suppose. I was interested in the compliance and legal liabilities, and so I'm on page 97. Again, reflecting the good status update, guys, so you read it with interest. Climate change, it says, continues to be a cause of concern with increased frequency of extreme events, yada, 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 yada. So poor old Wellington and Mile Point suffer massive flows from heavy rain. What happens with us here? Do we have an overflow from our wastewater treatment plant? Where does it go? Well, that's ultimately my question. Is I'm just thinking about, and I'm not actually having a crack at Wellington. I'm actually just interested in the way we state the risk here. Climate change, increased effects. It does impact our infrastructure, but it did make me think: what happens if we have inundation to our pipes? We've got more coming into our wastewater system. Where does the overflow go if it gets that bad, or does it not get that bad? Tony?
Bruce, if I just comment on that, I think that you never know. Each event seems to get progressively worse.
That's right, they're more intense, that's right.
One day it will reach the limits, and it's just sort of been on guard the whole time.
That's right, and I'm wanting to check our guardian behind you there, John, as to how I know it's okay.
If I just, through the chair, if I just look at Taupō, for example, in the Taupō plant, which is obviously where we have our greatest flows, we do have challenges with inflow and infiltration, and the team have got some plans around how to tackle that. But certainly we have a stormwater pond there, which has been installed, I think, quite some time ago now, so that's our diversion.
Yeah.
Resilience that we've got on site there. So it's a significant pond, and that is adequate.
Good. Yeah. I suppose it's always something. Well, yeah. Yes. Okay. No, it's fine. That's all I need to do at this stage, is to know that's where it sits. Sometimes it's great to know. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Look, that's very helpful, and look, we spent a lot more time on this, and I do think we might look, Louise, because in some sense I said this was unstructured. And this is for me as a note to chair. We probably should look at a slightly different way of looking at this going forward. I've appreciated the broad discussion. It's really superb, and it's a great report. I just think there may be a better way I can help lead us through this in the future, which is great. It's a great report. We remain in a situation where we feel pretty stable and appreciate that, but I think we're also recognising the challenges going forward, even if it's more intense weather, let alone the financial strategy. Can I move to the resolution, please, at this point, which is we received the report. I'm going to move it because I think it's a great report. Do I have a second, please? Thank you, John. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Insurance report, please. Another great report. Oh yes, we've got. Sorry, who have we got online?
KPMG are online to present a couple of reports, and also the proposed assurance plan for the next 3 years.
Brilliant. Best way to take this paper forward then, I invite Mataza to speak, or do you want to speak first up, Mark?
I'm happy to talk through and introduce those reports in turn.
Okay, do that please. Take it away, mate.
Just through the chair, because I see Christian's come online, but we are saving his little addition to the PX.
Okay, brilliant. We have to.
Just making sure he doesn't.
Yeah, no, okay, rightio. We'll deal with the PX item later, but we're dealing with the assurance plan at this point. So, Mark, if you could give us a quick snapshot before we invite KPMG to speak, please, it'd be great.
So we started a piece of work to identify what assurance is in place. And when we talk about assurance, it's what provides comfort to you as governors that the systems and controls that are in place throughout the organisation are working as intended and managing and mitigating the risks that the organisation faces. So we asked KPMG to look at what sources of assurance we have in place across the organisation. And from that piece of work, that's to identify the assurance that comes from each of the 3 or 4 lines of defence that's described in the model on figure 1. So that's the business, your standard business processes, your oversight, if you like, from outside of those standard business processes. Line 3 being your internal audit or outsourced internal audit capability, and line 4, which is something that local government faces, your external regulators and that sort of thing. So we asked KPMG to do a piece of work to map what we had in place across the organisation, and from that to tease out the high risk areas and areas where the controls were limited or were not up to scratch, and that would then inform the production of an internal audit program, which KPMG we've engaged to deliver over the next 3 years. So they did a significant piece of work. They had workshops with each of the general manager areas and teased out all of those lines of assurance and types of assurance and rated them based on the feedback that came from the business and put together quite a comprehensive map. The KPMG will present on the highlights from that map and their program in a minute. But they also, in the interim, we asked KPMG to do a couple of internal reviews. One Louise has touched on, which was the health and safety follow-up review, and the other one we asked KPMG to have a look at our cyber defences posts, or do a review of the cyber incident that we had, which they'll present on in the public excluded section. So I think if I hand over to Mataza, he's going to talk you through the assurance mapping and their proposed internal audit program for the next 3 years.
Brilliant. With the reflection that obviously we've got KPMG folk here for a number of reports. Let's remember the other ones are in PX, so we're doing solely with the internal audit. Mataza, welcome to the meeting. Great to see your face again with you and your is it Ash? Sorry. Welcome to the meeting as well. In your hands. A quick rundown would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mark. And before I get into the report, I just want to thank the committee and council for the opportunity to giving us an opportunity to work with you as your internal auditor. We appreciate the trust placed in KPMG and look forward to supporting the council and the committee going forward. So just taking it forward from Mark's introduction to the report. We, as Mark mentioned, that after having extensive discussions with executives and enterprise leadership team, we developed a risk-based plan for FY26 and 27 with some indicative thinking for FY28. The plan is deliberately focused on higher risk areas of change, and areas where current assurance is limited, and that sort of view of assurance that we got from the assurance mapping. And the idea here is to avoid duplication with other assurance activity that's already underway. So in terms of the coverage for the internal audit program, we're proposing one review in FY26, which is sort of one review in the plan. Mark talked about the 2 reviews that the management had asked us to do in FY26. So that's FY26 activity, and 2 reviews in FY27. The first, the review that we are proposing for FY26 is privacy review. Now, when we look at the privacy risk, is currently rated as medium, but some recent incidents and the upcoming changes to the Privacy Act from May 2026 means this is an area where timely and independent assurance is important. The review will look at whether governance and controls are strong enough to prevent repeat issues and meet new obligations. The second review, which is the FY27 review, will be the supplier management. Given how heavily the council relies on third-party suppliers to deliver some essential services, we will be looking end-to-end at how suppliers are planned, contracted, monitored, and exited, and whether those arrangements are effectively managing services, compliance, and reputational risk. And lastly, on the third review, which is the asset management, that with an asset base of almost 2 billion and aging infrastructure, current assurance coverage, as we found out from the assurance mapping exercise, is relatively low. So this review will focus on whether asset management practices are supporting, reliable service delivery and good, stewardship of public funds. We will be doing another asset management review that we're proposing in FY28, and that will be looking at the later part of the asset management process in terms of the capitalization and financial treatment of the assets. So that's the sort of view of 26 to 28 plan. But Chair, as you have seen our sort of audit plans at other councils, the intention here is to be very flexible. So if risk or priorities shift during the year, we can adjust and bring any changes back to this committee.
Thanks, Matasa. That's really helpful. Sarah?
Apologies, Christian's actually here for the health and safety audit. I got him mixed up with Philip because
Oh.
we've been working on both of them at the same time.
Okay, so do we want to hear the follow-up, anything on the follow-up report, the final report, as part of the papers?
Yeah, probably are. Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we just deal firstly then with the plan, then we can just have a quick discussion around the finalised health and safety audit. So any folk got any questions around the internal audit plan? Critical part. It's investing a bit of time and money into areas. It comes back to the assurance side of our role. Our broader responsibilities around all risk management systems and processes. These are the ones that Matasa, I totally agree with the process. I come up with a bunch of things that we should be focused on. Does this meet what you would like to see done? John, have you got it? Oh, sorry, I thought you were. Look, I'm comfortable. I was actually interested. Diagrams always get to me, Matasa. I tend to look at them first. I was interested that actually it suggested that our second line of defence, which is monitoring and oversight, was relatively marginal compared to the other areas. I just wondered, before we got to the actual program, wonder why that is. What could we do more there of? It just made me interested in systems and processes. Got any insights, guys?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the, this is the not unusual. The first comment I'll say, compared to what we've seen at other councils. So I would not say that you're out of sort of line with the line 2 activity. Now, when we talk about the maturity of the 4 lines of defence, of course, the responsibility for risk and controls monitoring and ownership sits with line 1. So you see, doing a lot of activity and making sure that you've got that solid line 1 basis, and then getting some line 3 assurance and line 4 assurance. Now, line 2 activities is generally sort of takes a bit of time, and that's that's just the appetite and the resource allocation. So I think where council is in that maturity journey is doing some risk management uplift, and then slowly gradually moving into the assurance activity from line 2. And we have made some suggestions, for example, some independent testing of operational controls that line 2 can take up, or validation activity of issue closures or the findings closure that line 2 can do. And that's sort of again quite standard practice that we've seen. So slowly and gradually building line 2's assurance capability and activity.
It probably says, Matasa, that as we commission you undertake the work, that if you can reflect on that as being a deficiency, well, if I can put it relatively speaking, a deficiency area, insights into your reporting would add value to us to understand how we integrate and pick that one up as we go through the individual topics. Look, the only thing I had with the topics was the timing, and which is the priority. And I always tend to think here, Sarah, looking your way about the LTP cycle. And they're all, the only problem is that they're all relevant to the LTP. And so we don't have perfect time or perfect resource to do them. You can see if you're looking at mine that I thought, I wonder whether 1 or 2 should come before the privacy one. Equally, I don't, I totally get the issue around the privacy. I probably value myself back to square one. We do what we've got here in front of us, but I just thought I would state I just wondered whether something like asset management or, for instance, community engagement would be ideally would be ideally done in FY26, given we're about to go into
history around privacy. So there was an email that went out to people's bankers to say that they owed rates money, and it created quite a difficult challenge for people with their banking relationships. It was quite a major breach when it wasn't factual.
I wasn't aware of that, but thank you, appreciate that. Okay, look, all I'm trying to reflect here is all, if I just step aside from the privacy, the rest are almost directly relevant to our LTP. So we probably don't have we're probably laying down some investment for the LTP that follows after that. Is really what it comes down to, I suppose, in lots of ways. Okay. Yeah, Wahine.
To the chair, yeah, I just had a question. I'm really interested. I'm on page 224, looking at the proposed areas for Line 3 assurance. I'm really interested in KPMG's stance on the community engagement strategy and the plausible risk rating applied to their ineffective relationships being of low risk. And I'm mostly interested in that plausible risk ratings because as Risk and Assurance Committee, we just received an update on the different areas of projects and the risks associated to those. And one of the top 2 high risks relies heavily on relationships in terms of the landfill. So I'm really interested to see how are we aligning that with, looking at this here on this side being identified as a low risk, but then in our project side, one of 2 high risks relies heavily on relationships. So how do we balance that out?
Yeah, through the chair, probably just not on KPMG to answer because they actually take our risk ratings and have reflected them in the documents. So they actually didn't come up with that. They've taken it from our ratings. Now, probably take it offline, but there are a number of things that feed into those risk ratings, and I think Mark said that that one in particular is actually going to come back to council to have a look at. Is that what you said, Mark? From a
through the chair. So the one we've still got to profile is the ineffective council. I think we've covered up all the rest of the strategic risks, but as you know, they get reviewed every 3 months.
Yes, and again, when you come and look at the framework, it's to do with things like statutory obligations, and we've got existing engagement mechanisms in place. So I might take it offline to have a chat with you how you work through it, and then we can. Hadley's not here, and he's probably the best person to talk through that community relationships because it's quite a broad. Risk area, and it's certainly not just one factor. So but I'm happy to work through. Mark's got a, that matrix where you look at each factor of that and work through the matrix.
I think what I'd say, Wahine, and I hear your point, and I like your thinking. You're integrating it with the other information we're getting, and I think that should be just make certain we've got that reconciled. The point is, it's on our internal audit program, so we're saying it is of. We're only doing 5 over 3 years or 2.5 years left. We're saying it warrants the weight of a piece of work being done. So I'd almost say, regardless of whether it's green, orange or red, we're doing it. Well, that's the plan here. And I think that's actually a really good thing. That was one I wondered whether we should have been doing this year, to be honest, given we're about to go into the big ones. But I said I've argued myself into the position. I'll run with the way we've got it sitting here. Bearing in mind we're laying down some investment for future LTPs, let alone the one that's coming up.
Yeah, through the chair, just because it's come up twice. So executive actually went through, so we worked with KPMG on that timing and considering internal resources, so that was the key for us. So there were a number of proposed recommendations for assurance pieces that were in the top kind of ones. As you can see, health and safety, which is the one outside of our risk appetite, is already covered by the review that Christian will talk about shortly. But and then the original health and safety assurance piece done. But the others, we then tried to fit it into a work program, allowing for resourcing with LTP. So I totally hear what you're saying, Bruce, but from an internal resource perspective, so that asset one, right? Are we going to put more on the finance team as they're trying to develop an LTP, do financial separation, and all the other reform work? So we had to fit it into a work program, and then that's kind of how we got to where we got to. So KPMG certainly advised on the top ones, but we've spread that over our program.
Oh, and look, and be clear, happy with that advice. As I said, I argue myself into the fact that actually we're laying down investment for future cycles as well, let alone, I did say it would be ideal to have them all done now, but I appreciate that's not a possibility, so we'll take it that way. I'm happy with that, Kim.
Through the chair, yeah, I hear Wahine's voice on this, and I wonder, our operating environment has changed, and whether or not ineffective relationships, if they get any worse, has the very real potential to impact on some of the other work streams which we've got rated as medium. And I just wonder whether that isn't, I appreciate it's resource intensive, and I appreciate there's a priority here, and I've thought through this as well, and I have some concerns that ignored or put on a back burner, it has the potential of getting bigger than it needs to be. That's all.
Yeah, and I think my thinking as well, Kevin thinks, was just it also relates to, you know, behaviour and how people act towards us if we don't have, you know, if there's strain on the relationship there, it can actually escalate to a health and safety matter.
Can I just speak a little bit in relation to that community relationship one? Not saying that we've got some work to do, but you have just had a conversation on your council community forums. You've just actually reset your community strategy. Part of it, not just, I was going to highlight the resourcing aspect, was to actually give them time to embed some of those decisions that you've just made. I would also say that your community engagement team will actually be heavily involved in the LTP. So, so from my take, Sarah's exactly jumped in and said exactly what I was going to say. Was part of the conversation was actually about spreading the workload across the organisation. We just don't have the capacity to do everything at once, and so we had to spread the workload, and we tried to move it around the organisation over time so that one team wasn't actually overly burdened by this particular piece of work.
Right, so that makes me, Wahine and Kevin, comfortable that we have it at this time. If you're undertaking work in this area, recognising there is some gains that can be made, let's see how that goes. That would make it a good time to then review it. Because, I mean, let's face it, internal audit isn't be all and end all. Sorry, I shouldn't say that in front of you, Ms. Mataza. It's a help. It's not necessarily the primary way in which we tackle an issue. And what I'm hearing is you're tackling the issue now. Let's get that embedded, and then we can deal with a review such as Mataza and team have got here for at the end of this training rather than at the start. Okay, well, we're going to test that when we get to the resolution. But I wonder if before we do it, if we could just hear from Christian on the other report, please. That's part of this, which is the health and safety sort of follow-up report, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. So allow me to open the top level presentation of this review, in so saying that the plans and the way to approach 2023 KPMG audit, it was highly proactive in the sense that you actually put up a structured approach to your journey towards a health and safety management system. And you do have a three-pronged approach and 3 live artifacts to drive those actions. So let me start with the Business Excellence Team Improvement Plan. It's live. Health and Safety Improvement Plan, live as well, and the Audit Improvement Plan for 2025. And equally critical, the review recognizes that the Council has put adequate resource to drive these plans in terms of internal and, of course, the external resources that you have tapped over the years. And on the top level observations, let me cover just 3 top dot points. So one would be around your critical risk management and business unit risk assessments. Secondly would be around highlighting your critical risk assessment progress with higher visibility to your executive and management. And the third bullet point would be around, as we heard just a while ago, around resourcing. So it's more about not just within the BAT resources, but of course the wider council, what are available to you to deliver those plans. Going back to dot point one, so it's about you do understand what you need to do when it comes to risk assessment. So two things would be around critical risk assessments and a business unit level risk assessments. So this review highlights that you have to deliver them and put some clarity around the completion of these risk assessments. And let me table the point that these risk assessments, from a better practice perspective, have to talk to each other. So they have this really clear linkages between them. So for example, business unit risk assessment. So they ideally feed into your critical risk assessments, and then in return, the critical risk framework would also inform your ERM in the process. Then again, you do comply with what the legislations are actually expecting from your operations. These number one observations more around uplisting and feed you of what we've seen in other councils or other organizations. The second bullet point would be around tracking and monitoring the critical risk assessment activities. So the review appreciates that the business excellence team would enjoy this visibility around the progress of these critical risks under its sponsorship. But during conversations, the review noted that some critical risk assessment progress would need to be uplisted when it comes to informing your executive and management teams as to the progress. So it's more about enhancing your governance around critical risk management framework. The third and the last would be potential resource constraints impacting delivery. So it's a good problem to start with because you do have a robust plan, even in so saying it's multi-year plan, very well detailed, and you do have highly capable leadership when it comes to BAT, your risk coordinator, and your health and safety manager. But the question is more around how will you deliver them given your, of course, finite resources. So this observation is not more about getting more resources, but to stop and think. So our available resources, can we still reallocate them, or putting up at the priority some other critical items like completing business unit risk assessments and critical risk assessments. So given so that you have 11, and the last time I spoke with the team, it was you have delivered 3 or 4 so far. So it's just my personal perspective that I've been hearing about health and safety being on the outlier when it comes to the health and safety agenda being on high risk. I think that's just my 2 cents, that probably this also drives that it being a medium or highly rated risk as we speak.
Thanks, Christian.
And,
sorry, keep going, mate.
Yeah, just right on time. So that's me opening the table for your questions.
Thank you, appreciate that. So folk, do you have questions for Christian on the report? So Kari, obviously you were keen on this. This followed up from the work we've done and seen how Louise and team have integrated this into the overall reporting. So your question, please.
Christian, I just note in the summary of the report, strengthening governance through consistent reporting. What do we see other councils doing? I do know, I'm just trying to think where it came from, but around longitudinal data, gathering that and reporting in that sort of a manner. Is that what you would see as being a way to consider that statement, or do you have another suggestion for us?
No, it's just as simple as a dashboard that you put forward to the executive and management, because coming from our conversation with your team, so there are no issues around those risks being sponsored under the BAT team, but the other functions with some sponsorship of other risks, they would have limited visibility. So we know for a fact that you're actually devising or designing integrated dashboard for the council officers or this group to have real-time visibility as to the progress of these critical risks.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Christian? Christian, that's been very helpful, thank you. As I said, we've already had the health and safety reporting from Louise, and I think it's Nikki, isn't it? Sorry, I keep the head in here, which has, I'm glad to report, meant that actually it's taken full cognizance of your report here. So it's been useful to see that it's been integrated back into the development. And I know, Louise, you'll keep us up to date with where you're at with the recommendations, which in effect I think we're hearing have been accepted by management. So we're going to be very keen to see how this develops and as it goes. So that's great. So can we go to the resolution, please, which is, just find myself a page here, which is we're going to do three things. One, I'm going to approve the assurance report. Thank you for that, Louise. And Mark, we approve the draft internal audit plan. So just to be specific, that means we retain the order in which they're in. We've had a reasonable debate on that, but I've got to say that's got to be tested here, and that we receive Christian's good report on health and safety. I'm going to move that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Kylie. Now, is there, do I need to have a debate, or we're going to put the motion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? It's carried. Brilliant. Thank you for that. Well, that's good, Mataza and Ash. But look forward to that work. And staff, thank you for being upfront about the resourcing implications. To said, I would love everything done yesterday. So I totally agree. We have to fit it in with it. And Kylie, you've made a good argument that privacy is something which is very real for us here in Taupō, so I'm not going to argue it. I look forward to the work being done and seeing the report. That will be sweet. Okay, if you KPMG folk, we've just got a couple of other bits to get through before we go into PX and we receive your next report, which is fine. So the last item in open is the committee work program. I'm going to move from the chair. We accept that. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Rachel. Sarah, was anything you needed to note on this? It seemed tickety-boo to me. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, it's carried. Brilliant. Right, I need to move us into PX. We've got on my page 246 the resolution, 2 items, cybersecurity update and incident review, and we have got Nigel's legal litigation update.
And Shani, do you need to do anything for live streaming, or it's been
I need to stop it
Once I made the motion, okay.
Shall I add the names of the KPMG?
Yes, please. Yes, and we'll just move that the KPMG folk can stay in the room, please. And whatever relevant staff. It looks like they're all relevant to me, so that's absolutely fine.
No. So Gideon online and probably Louise and Mark.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right, sorry.
Yeah.
I hadn't realised that. My mistake. My apologies, Louise and Mark. Okay, so we've got the reasons there. I've considered them to be appropriate that we move into PX for the reasons stated. I'm going to move from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Kylie. Is there any discussion on that motion? There being none, I'll put all those in favour. Please say aye.
Aye.
Against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Just give us a couple of ticks while Shani does all the hard yards to move us into PX. That'll be wonderful. Thank you.